Solomon Sanborn was a hatter from Massachusetts. Based on his final wishes, some may have considered him a mad hatter. When he died in 1871, the wildly patriotic Mr. Sanborn left his body to Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. Sanborn was happy to donate his body for the doctor's scientific endeavors, as long as certain stipulations were met. He requested that Dr. Holmes carefully remove the skin from his corpse and have the skin made into 2 drum heads that would then be made into a finished drum. The finished drum was to be presented to a local drummer on the condition that every year, on the anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, the drummer would visit the battle monument and beat out the rhythm of Yankee Doodle on the dried and stretched skin of the Massachusetts patriot. Welcome to Death Becomes Her, the minicast where we spend 5 to 10 minutes discussing death, dying, and grief from a variety of angles. I'm your host, Layla Kelly. Weird post-death wishes. What do you make of them? History is filled with last wills and testaments that stipulate all sorts of outlandish requests. Maybe you have something specific in mind after your death. I recently heard this request. As you will notice, there are some complex family dynamics at play here. But that's really no surprise, as death does tend to come with all sorts of interesting emotions. So here's the story. Years ago, like late 50s, early 60s, there's a young couple, and they have a little girl. Unfortunately, the little girl dies. So at the time, the young couple agrees to have the little girl interned in the family plot. Technically, it's the husband's family plot, and so that is where the little girl is buried. Years go by, and the couple has more children. And then eventually, they divorce. As more years go by, the husband remarries, and eventually he dies. He is buried next to his baby girl, as is wife number 2. Now, wife number 1 is still alive, and this is not sitting well with her. So this is what she asks of her now grown son. He would be the second child in this marriage. She asks that when she dies, he have his sister's body exhumed, moved to a new part of the cemetery, and she can then be buried with her baby girl. So the baby will be removed from the father's side and put at her side. That's our first story. Here's our second one. This story is about Joseph, who is in his 70s, and Joseph has quite a sense of humor. And he has decided that he thinks it would be just great if during his wake, a mime randomly shows up with the tear painted on his white face, doing all the mime standards. You know, the trapped in a box, running against the wind, exaggerated crying, all the mime stuff. He reasons that as time passes, people will remember his wake as exactly that, memorable. In a way, his playful legacy could live on. People will maybe say, remember the day the mime randomly showed up to Joseph's wake? So these are not the only 2 odd end-of-life wishes. People have come up with all sorts of ideas for their last wishes. But here's the thing. Your loved ones have to be on board with your requests. What if your family feels your wishes are in some way distasteful? For example, Joseph's son felt that the mime idea was completely inappropriate. He says that funerals and wakes are for mourning, and he felt that the presence of the mime would somehow clash with the mood. Consequently, he does not want to honor his father's wishes. The same goes with the man who has been asked to exhume the body of his sister. He wasn't really on board. I'm not sure how Oliver Wendell Holmes felt about turning his friend into a drum, but I can imagine that the request came with at least a few questions. So, What if you are one of these people who has a bit of a peculiar request as a last wish? Well, if you feel very strongly about it and you feel that your family might balk a bit, or maybe a lot, you could put your wishes into a legal document, but even that is not guaranteed to get what you want. Your best bet would be to do the footwork yourself. For example, the woman who wants her daughter to be exhumed and moved to a different part of the cemetery, she should go ahead and start taking care of that herself. Honestly, it may be easier for her too as the child's mother as opposed to the child's sibling. What about the man who wants the mime? Well, if you want a mime at your wake, I would suggest that you go find a mime, make a contract, get it all paid, and then you're also going to need to find somebody who can then signal the mime when it is time. The mime isn't going to know that you've died, so somebody's going to have to be on board in order for this all to happen. So, as you can see, these requests can get really, really tricky. And maybe you're waiting for me to tell you that there's some magic little form that you can fill out. No, there's not. All the advice that I can really give you is if this is what you want, you're really going to have to do a whole lot of organization before you die. That's all the advice I can give you. But it is good advice. As always, I want you to plan ahead. I want you to put your affairs in order, even if they're a little bit outlandish. Just start doing the footwork right now. Start filling out your advance directives. Start doing your last will and testament. Just get started. Start having the conversations with your family. Put in the effort now. It'll make everything so much easier for your family later. And perhaps your own special breed of last wish will in fact be honored. So this is my question to you. Have you ever faced an interesting last wish that you were trying to honor for somebody that you loved? If so, I would love to hear your story. You can find me on Instagram at LeavingWellDeathDoula, or you can reach out to me through the information that is coming up in the outro, and that is coming up right now. Thank you for listening to the Death Becomes Her minicast. Connect with me, Lyella Kelly, at www.leavingwellmt.com. Special thanks to Roman Belov for our intro and outro music. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, talking about death won't kill you. I promise.